Last night, we had one of those conversations that almost everyone has at some point in their lives. Can you actually manifest winning the lottery? Some of us believed you could. Others weren't so sure. One person argued it's a numbers game. Buy the bigger ticket, get the better chance. Someone else countered that the draw has to match the ticket you already bought, tossing around terms like frequency alignment and quantum physics. Before long, we were throwing around a lot of concepts that sounded interesting. But if we're being honest, none of us really stopped to ask the most important question: how? If someone tells you to become abundant or raise your vibration, what does that actually look like? They sound like nice ideas, but tomorrow morning when you wake up, what exactly are you supposed to do? For the next few minutes, I don't want you to believe anything I say. In fact, I'd rather you didn't. I want you to treat this like a controlled experiment with observable variables, because whether manifestation is a literal force or not, there is a hidden mechanism beneath it that we can actually test. Imagine two people buy the exact same lottery ticket, same day, same draw, identical odds. The first buyer spends the week checking their app, constantly wondering, what if this is the one? They feel a desperate need for this win to change their life. The second buyer smiles, puts the ticket away, and goes home. They simply live their life, completely unattached to the result. Both people have the exact same mathematical probability of winning, but they are living from two completely different states of mind. This brings us to a misunderstood concept: identity. Your identity is not your job. It's the quiet, invisible story running in the background of your mind. It's the answer to questions like, how does life usually treat me? Or, am I lucky? We answer those questions every single day. Imagine two friends lose $100 on the exact same afternoon. The first friend is annoyed for a moment, then moves on. The second says, "This always happens to me. Money just disappears from my life." Only one of them turned that loss into an identity. An event is just an event. It only gains power when we attach a story to it. Those stories dictate our reality. Have you ever decided you wanted to buy a specific car, maybe a white RAV4, and suddenly you see them everywhere? The number of those cars on the road didn't change overnight. Only your attention changed. Psychologists call this selective attention. Your brain takes in an unbelievable amount of information every second. To keep you from being overwhelmed, it filters reality. It keeps what it thinks is important and quietly ignores the rest. Now apply that biological function to your abstract story. If you tell yourself you're someone who always struggles, you are essentially programming your brain to filter for evidence of struggle. This invisible story programs your biological hardware to notice or ignore specific aspects of reality. This leads us to a much bigger question. If shifting your inner state changes what you notice, could it also change what actually comes into your life? While no one can objectively prove the mystical side of manifestation, both psychology and manifestation mandate the exact same starting point. You cannot start by trying to change the external world. You have to change yourself first. To recalibrate your biological filter, we use 4 specific states of being: belief, certainty, detachment, and alignment. These pillars provide the how by replacing a passive story with an active, testable framework. Treat these as structural components of your mental filter rather than mere ideas. I challenge you to actively run this experiment on your own invisible story, starting tomorrow morning.
Let's start with a single word: belief. It is easily one of the most misunderstood concepts in the entire manifestation space. When most of us hear that word, we immediately picture someone standing in front of a mirror, forcing a smile and loudly declaring, "I'm going to be rich," or "I'm incredibly lucky." If we're being honest, that isn't actually belief. That is a performance. It's a conscious attempt to aggressively convince yourself of a reality your mind simply does not accept yet. Real belief is much quieter. It operates entirely in the background. It's the automatic story you tell yourself a split second before you've even had the time to consciously think. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Imagine two people applying for the exact same job. They have identical experience, they submit their resumes on the same day, and a week later, they both get invited in for an interview. When the email arrives, the first person reads it, and their automatic internal script fires off. They've probably made a mistake.
Once I get in there, they'll realize I'm not good enough. The second person gets the exact same email, and their script says, they obviously saw something in my application. Let's go see where this conversation goes. Watch what happens when they arrive at the building. The first person sits down defensive, trying their hardest not to fail. The second person sits down relaxed, looking forward to a dialogue. They carry a different body language, a different tone, and a completely different energy into the room. They are sitting in the same physical chair, answering the same questions, but they are experiencing two completely different realities. And the divergence wasn't driven by external facts. It was driven entirely by the quiet story they told themselves before they walked through the door. Now, let's look at how this plays out with something completely out of our control, like buying a lottery ticket. Imagine someone hands over their cash, takes their ticket, and instantly thinks, well, people like me never win. Notice what they are missing here. They aren't saying the mathematical odds of winning are incredibly small. That would be a statement of statistics. Saying it won't happen to me is a statement of identity. Before the draw even happens, they've quietly locked themselves out of the winning category. Now imagine a second buyer with the exact same ticket. They don't force a loud, artificial certainty that they are absolutely destined to win. They just look at the ticket and think, someone has to take the prize. Why have I already decided it can't be me? They haven't guaranteed themselves a specific outcome, but they also haven't preemptively closed the door on the event. True belief is simply the choice to leave the door open to possibility. We see this dynamic constantly in everyday life. Take someone who identifies as unlucky. If their morning train is delayed, they sigh and think, see, cursed. If they spill their coffee, it's typical. If a friend cancels plans, it becomes undeniable proof the world is actively working against them. Put a person with a neutral mindset in that exact same morning routine. The train is late, so they listen to a podcast. They spill their coffee, they wipe it up. Plans change, they say, no worries, we'll catch up later. Same physical events, totally different interpretations. Psychologists have known why this happens for decades. The human brain does not function like an objective camera, perfectly recording reality. It acts as a filter. Every second, you are bombarded with millions of sensory inputs. Your brain has to block most of it out, or you would be overwhelmed instantly. And the primary rule your brain uses to decide what information makes it past that barrier is what you already believe to be true. If you believe people are selfish, your brain lets in every piece of data that confirms selfishness, while blocking out acts of kindness. When an individual constantly finds proof that the world is a hostile or unforgiving place, it's not because physical reality shifted to punish them. It's because their internal filter redirected their attention to find exactly what they told it to look for. Manifestation teachers frequently claim that your beliefs create your reality. A cognitive psychologist would phrase it slightly differently. They would say your beliefs shape the reality you experience. One is a claim about the mechanics of the universe, and the other is a claim about the mechanics of the mind. But look closely, and you'll see they both give you the exact same instruction. You have to start by altering the core belief. Whether changing that automatic story actually shifts the physical universe around you, or whether it merely shifts your psychological perception of it, is something you'll have to test for yourself. But the absolute necessity of that first step is undisputed. So here is the question I want you to sit with today. What is the specific sentence you repeat about yourself so often that you've completely stopped noticing you're saying it? Maybe it's, I'm not good with money, or I always have to work twice as hard as everyone else. Whatever that sentence is, your only job today is to catch it. Don't judge it, and don't aggressively try to flip it in the mirror. Just observe it. You cannot rewrite a personal narrative until you pull it out of the background and realize you are living inside one. Because if belief is what opens the door to possibility, we have to talk about what keeps that door permanently wedged open, and that brings us to certainty. When people talk about certainty, they usually describe a feeling of total prediction. They imagine saying, I know I'm going to win, or I'm 100% sure it's coming. But humans cannot honestly forecast the future. Claiming to know an outcome before it happens is actually a guess, not certainty. Think about the last time you ordered something online. You received the confirmation email and knew the order went through. Then you simply continued living your life. You trusted that you had done your part. Now imagine someone who doesn't trust the process. They spend every hour checking the tracking number, refreshing the app, and watching videos about delayed deliveries. This obsession changes nothing about the delivery. It only changes the person's immediate experience. One person lives in trust. The other lives in the state of waiting. This behavior often infects the rest of our lives. If you buy a lottery ticket, you might spend the next 5 days wondering if this is finally the week your life begins, constantly checking for a sign that things are about to change. In that moment, a ticket or a future event has quietly become responsible for your current emotional state. We fall into this trap with everything. We tell ourselves we'll relax when we earn more money, or feel successful once we get promoted. We postpone our happiness and move into a psychological waiting room. The waiting room feels productive, like we're doing something by being anxious, but we're actually just putting our lives on hold until reality gives us permission to feel different. This pattern ensures that life is always somewhere else, never here. Consider two people holding the exact same lottery ticket. The first person decides that they can only feel secure once they win. Their peace is locked behind a condition they can't control. The second person decides to practice the feeling of security today, regardless of the ticket. They refuse to wait for the jackpot to start being the person they want to be. This is how successful entrepreneurs operate. They face markets they can't control and outcomes they can't see, yet they keep showing up because they rely on their own ability to learn and adapt. True certainty is the confidence that you will be okay regardless of what happens. Freedom belongs to those who make their emotional security a present-day practice instead of a future reward. When you practice a feeling every day, it eventually hardens into an identity. That identity then dictates your survival. Someone who believes they can always find a way will look for solutions during a crisis, while someone who believes life is against them will look for proof of their defeat. This happens through a mechanical sequence. Your core belief creates your life story. That story directs your attention towards specific details. What you focus on determines how you interpret events. Your interpretation drives your behavior, which ultimately shapes your future. Whether you follow manifestation or basic psychology, the conclusion is identical. Changing your internal state is the only proven way to change your outward actions. Ask yourself, if you already felt financially secure today, how would your actions change? Would you still rush your morning? Would you spend the afternoon worrying? Or would you move through the day with more ease and trust? Certainty is the refusal to let the future decide who you are today. However, there is one final thing that usually gets in the way and quietly destroys this peace: attachment. Once you stop waiting for life to begin, you finally become available to actually live it.
We often discuss the theory of personal change, but moving from thought to lived experience requires a specific shift in how we navigate everyday situations. This shift is frequently called detachment. It's a word that usually suggests a lack of caring or a move towards becoming emotionless, but those definitions miss how the mechanism actually functions in the real world. To see how it works, we have to look for the invisible line where a simple desire for something transforms into a psychological necessity. Consider two people who go on the same successful first date. They both leave feeling a genuine connection, yet their internal reactions to that success are worlds apart. The first person goes home and acknowledges they'd love to see where it goes. Then they return to their life. They go to work, see friends, and engage with their hobbies. If a second date happens, it's a win. If it doesn't, they feel the disappointment, but their world remains intact. The second person begins imagining a wedding that hasn't happened. They check their phone every 10 minutes and spend hours analyzing the subtext of every message with friends. Their focus has shifted entirely to a future outcome they cannot control. While the desire for a relationship is identical, one person remains present in their life, while the other has effectively moved into a waiting room, unable to settle until the future arrives. This same pattern shows up in something as simple as a lottery ticket. Once the ticket is in hand, the psychological reaction reveals the level of attachment. For some, the week is spent in a state of constant mental rehearsal, checking the app, visualizing the spend, and feeling a strange sense of loss even before the draw occurs. There is a sense that life is on hold until those numbers appear. This emotional dependency is the core of attachment. It is the quiet, persistent belief that happiness is a commodity stored in the future,
and we are merely waiting for life to grant us permission to access it. When we live this way, weeks turn into years spent in a state of "I'll be happy when." We become experts at the habit of postponing joy, always looking past the present toward a milestone that remains just out of reach. We see this clearly in how people handle their finances. Imagine two friends, both diligently saving for a house. The first friend's internal state is tethered to their balance. An unexpected expense feels like personal failure. The second friend budgets responsibly, but their stability doesn't break when a surprise occurs. Their internal state remains independent. One identity is anchored to a changing circumstance. The other is anchored to character. Internal state also dictates the nature of our actions. Suppose you win a small sum, $147, and decide to give 50 of it away. One person gives because they feel they have more than enough. Another gives as a form of cosmic negotiation, hoping the donation acts as a down payment on a larger future reward. This transactional logic often hides in smaller moments, like buying a coffee for the person behind you in line. If the act is done to brighten someone's day, it's a moment of abundance. If it's done with the expectation that good karma will return a $10,000 windfall, it's simply a business deal with the universe. Real abundance doesn't keep a receipt. Your intention reveals the world you actually live in, one of genuine plenty or one of constant, fearful negotiation. There is a practical way to audit this mindset. The next time you experience a small win, finding $20 or receiving a compliment from your boss, pause for a moment. Pay attention to how quickly the mind tries to dismiss it by saying, "It's only $20," or "It's only one compliment." This habit of "only" is a training program for the brain. It reinforces the idea that what is present is never sufficient, and that satisfaction must always be larger and further away. Contrast this with the practice of noticing every small piece of good fortune without dismissal. Neurologically, your brain finds what you train it to prioritize. If your focus is on lack, your mental radar finds every problem. When you notice abundance, you train your brain to recognize previously invisible resources. You change the filter through which you see the world. This is where we find the real meaning of detachment. It is the state of needing less from the future to be okay in the present. Abundance is measured by how little your peace depends on your circumstances. Alignment occurs when the search for future abundance ends, and the practice of living as someone who already possesses it begins. Let's start with a simple question that usually starts an argument. Can you actually manifest winning the lottery? If you ask around, you'll get two kinds of answers. Complete skeptics will tell you absolutely not, and staunch believers will say yes, definitely. Neither of those positions is particularly interesting. A much better question to ask is this: what kind of person would you become if you genuinely practiced a specific set of mental states every single day? This is a testable hypothesis. It doesn't require faith in a theory. It requires you to run an experiment in your own life. Instead of asking you to believe me, I'm inviting you to run a 30-day trial. During this window, you will act as both the scientist and the experiment. You have one objective: observe yourself without judgment. Just observe. The goal is to move past theory and begin gathering objective data on your own internal reactions to the world. The baseline methodology starts every morning. Before you check your phone or talk to anyone, sit quietly for 5 minutes. Ask yourself, if I had lived in complete financial security for the last 10 years, who would I be today? We are going to ignore the outcomes like the cars you drive or the house you'd own. Instead, look at the internal notes. How would you walk into a room? Would you still feel threatened by someone else's success? Would you still spend your day worrying about things that haven't happened yet? Write down your genuine thoughts. Avoid writing what you think sounds spiritual or correct. Only write what actually comes to mind. Choose one specific narrative to change for the day. If you catch yourself saying, "I'm unlucky," pause. Replace it with something true, like, "I'm learning to notice opportunities." This practice allows you to consciously choose a different story to guide your day. On the second day, introduce the variable of generosity. Buy someone a coffee or donate $5. Perform this act without expecting anything back. You aren't trying to impress the universe. You are simply practicing the traits of an abundant person. On the following day, practice certainty. Complete the work you've committed to, and then stop worrying about the result. Your mind will likely want to check, control, or predict the outcome. When you notice that urge, smile and let it go. These exercises are not about earning a reward. They are the active practice of a new identity. When something goes wrong, practice detachment. Instead of the knee-jerk reaction of "nothing ever works for me," try an objective statement. That's disappointing. Acknowledging disappointment while refusing to let it decide who you are prevents a single event from defining your character. This diagram represents alignment, a constant recalibration you'll perform throughout the day. Before making any decision, ask if the choice is coming from your fearful self or your abundant self. If you pick up the wrong item at the store and lose $10, does your entire mood collapse? Or do you take the abundant path, smile, and move on? When a friend gets a promotion, do you feel a quiet sense of envy, or do you genuinely celebrate with them? If someone cuts you off in traffic, do you carry that anger for an hour, or do you prioritize your own peace over being right? True identity is revealed in these hundreds of tiny moments. It is forged in how you think and react when life doesn't go your way. Let's look at the projected results of this 30-day trial, starting with the psychological perspective. This diagram shows how your internal focus acts as a filter for incoming information. By shifting your perspective, you begin to notice opportunities that were previously invisible, allowing you to respond to life instead of reacting to it. If manifestation is also correct, then perhaps an even deeper shift in reality begins to occur. The exact mechanism is for you to discover. The value lies in the data you gather from your own experience. This brings us back to the lottery ticket. Buy it if you enjoy it. Dream and have fun with the idea of winning. However, you must ensure that a ticket never becomes the primary source of your peace. The real prize of this experiment is building a mind that isn't dictated by fear and a heart that doesn't need permission to be grateful. You are building an identity that doesn't depend on your circumstances. This week, stop trying to manifest a change in your reality. Reality doesn't create your identity. Your identity creates the reality you experience.